friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I'm J.R. Stays.
And I'm Cheyenne Oserini.
And welcome to the show. You know, we had a completely different show planned.
We
Cheyenne.
did.
And it's all gone off the rails.
This whole week has gone off the rails, Jer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you are, and I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, don't ask.
Yeah. So here's what the focus of today's show is going to be. We posted, and I say we because we all worked on this story, you as well, talking about the closure of the Starbucks at Mack and Woodward. And as Fletcher alluded to last night on the show, that we didn't expect this kind of reaction.
No, we didn't.
But it's actually turned into an opportunity to talk more about some issues. And we have actually started a larger reporting project on it. So if you do not get our newsletter or you have not seen the story linked in Click on Detroit and you haven't seen it on Facebook or Twitter, here are the details. The Starbucks at Mack and Woodward, it's been open, I think, since 2006 when the Ellington lofts were built, renovated again in 2016.
Yep.
It closed abruptly, and the reason cited by Starbucks, the company, was a lack of safety.
So we had heard rumblings that something was afoot at this Starbucks. And so we contacted Starbucks corporate and they quickly got back to me. And I asked him straight out, like, what is happening with this location? Is it closed? Is it being renovated? And he basically said, no, it's closed. And I said, oh, why?
The question that all journalists should, right?
Right. And he basically said we closed because after quite a long time of trying to mitigate this within corporate and with the city of Detroit, they could not keep their partners or customers safe, basically. You know, Chair, people keep saying, oh, well, it's just a coffee shop closing. Like, what's the big deal? But to me, reporting on this story, there is so much more that we're uncovering. And it goes deeper than just a coffee shop.
For me, it was the response.
Yeah.
I literally thought, no, like it would be our usual group. And, you know, it's not like 100,000 people.
Right.
And hundreds of comments. And the response, not just on social media, but of people saying, I'm so glad you said something. Let's unpack this a little bit. This is something that there have been a lot of people spreading ideas of what they think happened.
Right.
In the intervening time, so many of you have reached out, readers, listeners, who have connections to this store or literally part of it. Like, I'm not as interested in your opinion if you just have a feeling.
Right.
But I am interested in experiences. And we have unpacked so much more that we are actually going to put into a full separate podcast episode. But because this has gone so big, I wanted to address some things right off the bat. And then talk about some of the things that we're going to be looking into in our reporting going forward. A little bit of a look under the hood, if you will, because I don't think media outlets do enough of that.
No.
Most people don't know what we do.
No. So we're going to get a little inside baseball here.
100%. But I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think number one, let's talk about motivations. From a journalism point of view, it is important to talk about the truths in a community. We get hit, and we've gotten hit a bit lately as we have grown.
Yes.
That we are being too negative. Here is the deal. When you live in a community, as I do, and you spend time and you work in a community, telling the truth, I think, is one of the keys to going forward. If you stick your head in the sand, that is a high school way of doing things. That is a middle school way of doing things. The other thing is that it doesn't address the issues at hand. So we're about to talk about things like mental health. And we all know this, right? That just people who are poor, this is not the kind of behavior that happens. When you're talking about the kind of behavior that's being described by former employees, by former managers of what's happened at this store, this starts to uncover something different. And then you start to lay over the color and context of what's been happening in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so buckle up, because there are going to be a lot of cognitive biases challenged here. So far, what we found, even in just this amount of reporting, and we're doing more, we've already done some interviews with local business owners. We've got more coming down the way. We've got residents that have reached out to us to talk about the issues on that corner and throughout Midtown about what's happening. And if we don't talk about it, it will never get addressed. And for the people who are hurting and suffering, it'll just be ignored with like some wag on Facebook of being like, well, you don't know what's happening. And to be clear, we both love the city and love Detroit. We wouldn't do this. There are far more lucrative professions than professional newsletter and podcasters.
Yeah.
This isn't about financial gain, even though this episode will have no sponsors, because this kind of content can only be paid for by members at patreon.com or buy me a coffee, because sponsors don't want to touch this kind of thing. That's part of why you don't see as much of this stuff being reported. That's just the facts. I mean, individual journalists, they have their limitations and things like that, but there aren't the resources there.
No.
So we're going to dive in and let's jump in to some of this. I think first we need to dispel some myths.
What do you think the biggest myth is, Jer?
I think one of the biggest myths that I'm seeing on social media is that this was about union organizing.
I have also seen this, and I didn't get that vibe from the person I talked to.
And I don't think we have gotten that vibe, or not even a vibe. I have received zero evidence that there was even a heavy unionization drive going on from the people who have reached out so far. Something different, and that is if you were involved in it or you did it, that this really wasn't something that was catching on. Like, this wasn't a thing that was being actively pursued.
Right.
So I think we need to set that aside for now. I don't think that was a major cause of this one. Although there are issues around the country with Starbucks, the other fact that we need to deal with in that unionization question is that although it gets a lot of coverage in the media, and it gets a lot of coverage in the media because it drives clicks from people who are politically aligned with that, and we're going to get into other political issues in this too, the actual number of this and push of this isn't very large for unionization of coffee shops. Like, on balance, they're newsworthy because there's so few of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that does not mean that I disagree with unions, right? Because that's the other thing, is that when we talk about something like this, people assume it's that opinion.
Right.
Like, I am from a union family. You are from a union family. We're very familiar with them and the benefits.
Yes.
But we have to look at the facts on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. I think another myth is that this doesn't happen anywhere else in the area.
Yeah.
So far in both of our work, what have you found?
I have seen this kind of activity throughout the city. It doesn't matter where it's at.
I have found with a couple of interviews I've already done and some background conversations that this is an issue across greater downtown Detroit. There are issues with businesses within a block of here. There are issues at the FedEx. There are issues at the dentist office.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to someone today who was spit at.
Ew.
Yeah. Now, what's causing this? I think we need to start opening up the question about mental health services in not just Detroit, but Metro Detroit. And there are things that have happened in this neighborhood. Now, we're going to follow these leads. We don't know what the causes are, but we need to look at all of the different things. We need to acknowledge, and they have not responded back to me to my inquiry, but the NSO, one of the major organizations that helps the unhoused, their facility left the 3rd Street location in Martin Luther King over the pandemic. And it was closed, according to multiple sources that I have been told that deal with mental health, that it closed kind of in the dead of night. Like, there wasn't much warning to anybody. They said it was the pandemic and then it was just gone.
Right.
So those services are not there for people. Another thing, talking on background about mental health, people who are dealing with issues like schizophrenia, severe depression, like a number of issues that a lot of this population deals with, you can't just move them.
No.
Because that is the world that they know. Those blocks, those areas. These kinds of incidents happen when people are going through crisis or severe hardship, and there's other issues going on, including generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just about poverty.
No.
And laying the blame at any one individual organization, the problem is that it's going to make it harder to solve.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about it. Another thing we need to look at. Officer Colin Rose of the Wayne State Police Department was tragically killed in 2017. You know, there's the dog park. I've taken my dog to the dog park that's there near Woodbridge. That story faded out of the news because it dragged on for so long, the pandemic and anything else. Now, people reported on it. I don't want to say it was uncovered. There are a lot of media outlets who do a good job in this town. But we cannot decide what spreads or goes viral. And the aftermath rarely does. So I did some digging.
Oh, yeah? What did you find?
The suspect in this, Raymond Durham, was found incompetent to stand trial because of mental issues, and his family talked to multiple outlets about mental issues.
Right.
This officer was murdered by someone with mental issues.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying the two are necessarily related, but one question I'm going to have, has Wayne State University Police reduced the amount of times they have picked up or dealt with people with issues since this incident? Are they taking more of a hands-off approach?
Right.
Another myth. I look at the crime viewer.
Yeah.
It's clear talking to business owners, they don't report it to the police because some are worried about what the police will do.
Right.
In the wake of George Floyd, everything else. Others have had issues where they don't get responses, especially with Detroit police. There is a perception of better response, and there is an anger that those who pay into the community don't get service, and those who do the extra thing do. We have to dig into that even more. And I think there's a lot of like butter spread over all of this.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people invested, and I think we have to fix the problem because the number one thing is that people, whether they've been in the city a long time, whether a short time, whether they are visitors, the basic thing is that people deserve to be safe.
Right.
So we need to start uncovering these rocks. I have found in the city of Detroit, despite all of the hype, without pressure, nothing changes.
I do have a question because I've also seen a lot of, the big G word.
Well, use it multiple ways, right? So
Yeah.
I remember when this opened, people said that this was about gentrification.
Mhm.
And now I hear people say it's about gentrification to push them out.
Yeah.
Because there is a thing about this. So a lot of people talk about Starbucks. The reality is, and I was there often, you were there often, usually the majority of the crowd at the Starbucks when I visited was actually people of color.
Yeah. It was generally people of color who were there and people who worked at the medical center.
Yes. Which leads me to another question. I noticed one listener mentioned to me that they work at Wayne State, and Wayne State police told them to not go there. Why are they not telling us to not go there?
Right.
If it's internally a no-go, why is it externally a go? Why aren't we redressing this?
Yeah.
And I know that some of these are above pay grades, right? So I really, so far, it's like there are definite issues with mental health.
Mhm.
Mental health funding has been cut. I've talked about that before. It's a difficult issue to build a coalition around because honestly, a lot of people don't care about mental health.
No.
And it's fair to say, oh, well, we're highlighting this because it's in greater downtown. But the reality is that this happens across the city. I had a listener that lives near 6 in Wyoming talking about these problems and how the businesses there deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is a much more heavy hand
Mhm.
than what happens in downtown Detroit where there's more eyes.
Right.
But people will pay attention because it's downtown. But there needs to be a wider conversation because this is happening across the city in parts of the region.
Mhm.
Mental health is broken.
Across the country.
Across the country. This is a ongoing issue. Places like San Francisco have spent tons of money and still not really solved this because I think it's a politically difficult one.
Mhm.
And it's going to question everyone's cognitive biases. Another thing I think we need to talk about is the Joe Biden crap is what I call it.
Oh, it's all Joe Biden's fault?
When clearly this is across multiple administrations. So here's the thing about saying that. Whether you're saying it on the left or the right, it's Joe Biden's fault or it must have been unionization. The problem with saying that when it's not true is that it minimizes the issues that are actually causing this problem.
Mhm.
Which so far, it seems to be that there are a number of people dealing with mental issues who do not get services.
Right.
So far.
Yeah.
This could change. This is the working thing. We're opening under the hood and saying what's going on. They're just not getting services, whether it's the county, the state, nationally, not getting services. And it invalidates that when you say it's just Joe Biden or it's just unionization, especially when it's not the case.
Yeah.
Right? It distracts from the actual cause. And that's what a lot of people want to do. They want to distract from the issue going on because the issue going on is difficult to handle. So I'm looking forward to doing more interviews, to getting into more stuff. What are some thoughts that you have going forward for reporting? Questions that you have?
One of the big questions I do have, we touched briefly on it, is the question of do businesses who are not part of Project Greenlight get less services than those that do? Because if that's the case, that's a big problem.
To you, why is that a big problem?
It's a pay for play situation, right? Like you have to put in this extra money to get the services that every citizen in the city should get. So if you're already adding an additional payment to the city to provide basic services, that is a problem.
Fair. That makes a lot of sense.
Project Greenlight is a good project. Some people say. Some people hate it.
Some people claim that it's very effective
Right.
for their business.
Right.
I've heard that for
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
Like, this is all complex.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I'm trying to share in this episode, which you could pick apart individual clips or whatever and get mad at.
Mhm.
But this is a complex episode. And that's why we're going to be reporting it over the next weeks. and I wanted to share our notes so far.
Mhm.
There are people who feel very uncomfortable, especially women.
Yeah.
We have heard incidents from people dealing with overdosing in the bathrooms. Now that happens in lots of places. Like overdosing and the opioid problem is a problem, right?
Yes.
But I read one comment that, when you're 18 years old, like dealing with like dispensing Narcan
Right.
isn't really part of the barista handbook.
No, it's not.
But it's a reality out there, right? And it's far more pervasive than people want to talk about.
Right.
It's solutions oriented
Mhm.
to not just say there is a problem, but what is happening here, and maybe motivate people to address it more, because there are so many lives in the balance, whether it's the lives of the people going through these crises,
Right.
Whether it's the lives of people living nearby,
Mhm.
whether it's the employees, whether it's visitors, all those things, that matters.
Yeah.
And it's important to actually wrestle with this.
Jer, we have nearly 100 tips to go through. We need to follow back on. So we're not going to have any answers for us or anybody tomorrow. This is, like you said, a longer project that we are going to continue working on. And like you said in the beginning, there is no quick fix for this. And we just are going to continue to do our reporting, and we're going to continue to reach out to the people that come to us, and we will put together a really in-depth episode with maybe some insights.
Understanding what's happening on the ground.
Right. And possibly some possible solutions. We don't know.
And that might be multiple parts.
Yeah.
Because one of the things to reach out to is people who serve that community and talk about what is actually happening and what are some of the things going on.
We have a lot of contacts throughout the years, so we will contact them all as well. And we'll get back to you all on this.
Well, with that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit.
And I'm Cheyenne Oserini.
Of course, if you've got feedback, tips, leads, ideas, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.